Even if you don't care at all about the British royal family, Oprah Winfrey's interview with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry was riveting TV, a news-making event whose aftershocks are still reverberating. It's also being touted as a model for journalists everywhere to emulate, but that might not be realistic or even desirable. Adam has more.
As Oprah Winfrey basked in the afterglow on CBS this morning, her friend Gayle King offered this gushing review.
I thought you were perfection.
She wasn't the only one. Media critic Jay Rosen tweeted, "That was the best interview I have ever watched." The Washington Post's Margaret Sullivan called it a master class in nailing down the news. But a few caveats are in order, starting with Winfrey's unique theory of interviewing.
Tell me what your intention is, and I will tell you what my intention is, and let's see if we can align those two.
For the record, most journalists don't see their interview subjects as collaborators, and as a rule, we don't go to their weddings.
But I remember sitting in the chapel, and thanks for inviting me, by the way.
You're welcome.
Also, there were some questions Winfrey couldn't get answers to, like exactly what Kate Middleton allegedly said to Markle to make her cry, or which member of the royal family fretted over the skin tone of Meghan and Harry's child.
Neither his grandmother nor grandfather were a part of those conversations. He did not tell me who were a part of those conversations. Right. As you can see, I tried to get that answer.
Yeah. Still, Winfrey did listen closely, ask smart follow-ups instead of sticking to a script, and use silence as a tool.
Did it feel like betrayal when you found out your father was working with the tabloids?
Things every interviewer should do, even if we often don't.
All right, Adam, for the record, I watched every minute of it and found it fairly riveting, but I was one of the ones who found it a little bit on the soft side. Yes, indeed, she did disclose that she had gone to the wedding, but she didn't disclose that she's in a deal to make documentaries with Harry. And I also felt on the question of not giving the baby a title, apparently that is protocol, standard protocol in the royal family, that somebody that far down the line doesn't get a title. So there was no pushback on that. And I found a few other places, even on the issue of who asked about the race of the baby. I didn't think she pushed hard enough. She didn't eliminate anybody until the next day.
One thing we don't know, because these interviews are so produced, is if there was pushback that was, to use your phrase, left on the cutting room floor. I found it totally implausible, for example, that Meghan Markle wouldn't have done some research on the royal family before marrying into it. That was the claim. Then they moved on. We don't know what was said that we didn't get to see. The things that she did really well are big things. I want to stress that. It is amazing how many interviewers don't listen to what their guests are saying, do not take the lead that their guests give them, and then don't rush to fill the silence in an awkward moment. She did all those things. Those are really hard to do, and I think everyone would do well to emulate them. Margaret Sullivan at the Washington Post said she would love to see Oprah Winfrey interview MBS, the Saudi prince, who seems to have masterminded the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. That is an interview I would love to see, because you wouldn't have the air hug at the start. You wouldn't have the professions of coziness. It would be more adversarial, and I'd love to see what she could do with it.
Intriguing.
Yeah, I think what made this interview so good for so many people is that you saw Oprah react the way a lot of viewers were reacting. And because a lot of what you heard, especially if you were a person of color, resonated. I don't know how many times I had heard people ask how fair or how dark my child would be. My parents, who are from two different cultures, people apparently lined up when I was born to see what I would look like because they couldn't fathom it. So I think that resonated with a lot of people. I think that the best interviews are conversational and relaxed, and you can get a lot more out of the topic, out of the subjects when they feel comfortable enough to open up to you, when they don't feel like they're being grilled. And to Adam's point, she masterfully used a lot of skills that people would do well to use more of in normal interview situations. I don't know how she'd be with the Saudi crown prince. I can't imagine him as a guest on her show. And I think the people who you can imagine as a guest on her show tend to be more compelling interviews for her in that style. I think it's also important to remember that while everyone in the U.S. knows who she is and thinks, of course, she would land this kind of interview, there are people across the pond who are still wondering, like, how did she get a hold of these people? What's so amazing? And they're seeing it in a very different light than we are.
Well, first of all, disclosure, my employer, WBZ-TV, is owned and operated by CBS, which aired the interview, although it was a product of Harpo Productions, Oprah's production house. And look, I would point out that Meghan and Harry, whatever you may think of them, are not implicated in the decapitation slaughter of a prominent international journalist. So the notion that somehow these interviews would be comparable is a little bit much. I love Oprah. I think since Barbara Walters, she's the best at the celebrity interview and just does a great job. And while I take your point, Emily, about maybe she should have disclosed she's going to be collaborating with Harry, and I take some of the other criticisms as fair, I think what you see is what you get. There was truth in advertising there. You know when you tune into an Oprah interview, with the one exception of that author who she had touted, who turned out to have made up all
Little
this
Pieces
stuff.
or something,
Yeah. Then she really showed that she could, trash somebody if she wanted to. That's not what you're going to get from an Oprah interview. What you're going to get is what we got, which is just conversational, well done, heavily edited, too. Keep that in mind.
True.
Yeah, it was 3.5 hours all told, so it was beautifully edited to get to where she wanted to. By the way, Emily, in the discussion, she did say, you and I are working together, Harry. So she did disclose it in the conversation. So we did hear that. I mean, she didn't do it at the beginning of the thing, but she certainly did it as she went along. I think it cannot be stressed enough. Oprah is not a journalist. That is not what she wants to be. I don't know why people keep calling her that. In fact, the reason she stepped away from her 60 Minutes role, as she said herself, was it was too difficult for her not to be empathetic, not to bring all the stuff that people are now lauding her for in this interview. That's what she wanted to do. I would say all the things that you said before about her ability really to listen, that's a huge thing, is so important. The one thing that just, following up what Lylah said, that kind of set off me and some of my friends of color was that she knows full well that everybody's asking about the color of that baby. So her expressed shock to me, I guess, was for other people that she would be expressing it on their behalf. But as a black person, she knows full well that is happening all the time. So I was like, I can't figure out what that's about. But other than that, and only one other time when she almost talked over Meghan, but every other time I thought the way that she was able to be with her guests were fine. Listen, here's the hardest thing to do. If you really know somebody, like she knows them to the extent, and you're in that celebrity circle, what you may perceive as softball is really kind of hard-edged for her to ask the kinds of questions she did when she travels in that circle, and and they hang out. They're neighbors. That was a skill to walk along that ledge and get what she got.